Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 69 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We got a nice one for you today. It is the NFL 2021 season preview, and we got a lot to break down as this new season begins. First, a quick plug. Tim and I will be starting our weekly pick'em again for the NFL season. We'll be tweeting it out on the Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. I won last year by 6 games. I've got the bragging rights, but Tim will be trying to come back strong and beat me this year. So you can follow along on our Twitter for that. But let's dive into this. We've got a panel today to discuss this upcoming NFL season. Should be a great one, an extra week. And it got started with the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. We have Zoe Alter here, Joshua Franks, and Andrew Bellows. But before we talk about the divisions, we saw a game, and personally, I was a little surprised to see how strong Dak Prescott was in his return. The Bucs got the win, but the Cowboys put up a fight and maybe got hurt by the officials more than anything else. Tim, what are your impressions from that opening game?
Well, first off, and not to trigger Zoe a little bit, but Tom Brady is better than ever. And I'll tell you what, two interceptions for Brady to open up the season that ultimately turn out to be meaningless when you look at the big picture. Ultimately, a drop back there by Leonard Fournette. The ball tips into the air, and that becomes an interception. And a Hail Mary at half is ultimately going to, blemish his contract situation in the future, maybe cost him a couple $1 million. But in all seriousness, though, Dak Prescott, all the questions going into this season with the shoulder injuries and, with the strain and so on, and obviously the leg injury, didn't play a single preseason snap in an official game. We wondered how he was going to play. And he was absolutely wonderful. However, again, trying to keep this short, ultimately the defense of Dallas, still terrible. Yeah, you added Micah Parsons. Yeah, you look at your corners, they're somewhat nice. But I think here's the fact of the matter, too. We looked at this team for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we just assumed, yeah, they won the Super Bowl, they're going to be good again. Especially after Sean Murphy-Bunting's injury. Yes, James Dean played a really good game in the secondary. The corners stepped up for a little bit. But what I think we just completely remembered about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is that this year, this is going to be a team powered by its offense. And the defense of the Bucs was never really that good to begin with. And the fact of the matter is, obviously, we know how bad Dallas's defense is. But at the end of the day, how do I put it? Obviously, first game of the year is always a surprise. For example, when you look at New England Patriots a few years back when they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, no one expected that. That was, I believe, Alex Smith's final hurrah in Kansas City. The fact of the matter, though, is this. Usually it's a tall tale early on, long 17 games, you add an additional week. But if I'm a Bucs fan, I'm real excited because you feel like early on this team can repeat. I mean, Antonio Brown. He looks like primetime Antonio Brown again. This offense is a threat. Rob Gronkowski looks like he has the potential to be back to where he once was. Doesn't mean he's going to catch, 20 touchdowns in a season, but physically he looks great. This offense just needed time to mesh into a system. In fact, I'll even say Mike Evans may not even be the number one target on the Buccaneers anymore. But their defense is something I'm a little bit concerned about. And I'm interested to see how Bruce Arians approaches the injuries they had in week one, but also trying to bolster and improve this defense moving forward. Dallas is still a dumpster fire along with the NFC East. That's my week one review in a nutshell.
Yeah, we're going to get started with the NFC East in just a second, but you mentioned it. The Bucs did not have many injuries last year, and that's part of the reason why they won the Super Bowl. And everybody thinks about their defense, but a lot of that was predominantly because of just how bad Kansas City's offensive line was in the Super Bowl. But let's start NFC East, the terrible division that it is. The Eagles are a mess right now and just keep bringing in more and more quarterbacks. The Giants have a lot of questions, same with Washington, and we already saw Dallas on full display. I'm going to start with Andrew first. Who do you think is going to be prevailing in the NFC East, and what are you looking for this season in the division?
I think the Cowboys are going to win the NFC East. I think there's a team for me that has the least questions. I think the Eagles, you have questions as to how Jalen Hurts is going to harness this offense. The defense, I don't even know what's going on in Philly with their defense. They have a new head coach. At least the Cowboys, you have a second-year head coach in Mike McCarthy. You have a powerhouse offense that I think is at least strong enough to carry the terrible defense they do have. Washington is a really good defensive team, but I have doubts as to whether Ryan Fitzpatrick will be able to lead that team to a division title. And the Giants have offensive line questions. Daniel Jones is not good under pressure. And although they have gotten better, they've added with Kenny Galladay and, Azeez Ojulari off the edge on the defense. I still don't think they're strong enough to beat the Cowboys out for the division. So I'm going to say Dallas is going to win.
Yeah, Dallas definitely has a solid roster. They put up a nice fight against Tampa Bay for sure. Zoe, over to you, your projections for this NFC East.
I also got to go Dallas just because one of the reasons is think about strength of schedule. They don't face another playoff team until I think week 9 or 11. So they have a good stretch of games where they should win those games. And they're the Cowboys, so, they might not. But with how Dak's been playing, if he plays at the same caliber, I don't think anyone can really catch them because of that. And also just because the rest of the teams in the East suck so badly.
It's a bad division. Ryan Fitzpatrick might somehow be the second best quarterback in the division. That's just how bad it is at this point.
If whoever gets to 5 wins first will take the division. That's just how it's going to go.
Well, it always, you can go 7-9 and win that division. And now I don't know what's going to happen with the 17 game schedule. Maybe you could go 7-10 and win the division, but you never know. But Joshua Franks, over to you, your projections in the NFC East.
I think the Cowboys, this loss against the Buccaneers, that's considered a win. I think there's too many question marks actually with the Cowboys with their inconsistent offensive line play, injury woes that they had last year that could still be a concern heading into this year. And also the question of secondary. I think them not getting Surtain in the draft really hurt their defense. Of course, we knew that they wanted them. And with the loss of Byron Jones a few years ago, they just haven't recovered on the defense. But the one team I think is defensively sound and can win championships, Washington. I think Washington's going to take the division. I think even though they're more inconsistent on offense, we're not sure how Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to do over there. I feel like that defense is really good. We saw what they were able to do with Heineke at quarterback, nearly knocking off the Buccaneers as well. So I think Washington is going to be the team to win that division.
Washington definitely has talent. They've got a lot of youth, of course, Terry McLaurin, Chase Young, but NFC East is going to be another battle probably till week 18 this year, just like it is any other year. NFC North. We're going to go to Zoe first, obviously, because of the Detroit Lions will probably be at the back of that division. But the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers is back and appears he wants to play for the team. The Vikings, of course, have some talent on that roster, but it's always up in the air with them. And the Chicago Bears are going to be starting with Andy Dalton and then transitioning eventually to Justin Fields. And they still have a solid roster and they have a top defense. So they could be an interesting team. Personally, I think the Packers are still going to run away with the NFC North, just the fact of having Aaron Rodgers there. But I'll start with Zoe on this one. Your projections for the North and, of course, for your Detroit Lions.
I'm right with you, Eddie. The Packers are definitely going to take it. It doesn't matter that Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be there. Just overall, they have the best team and they always manage to get it done. Sure, they'll probably go to the NFC Championship and lose. They're not going to go to the Super Bowl, but they will win the division. Justin Fields, he'll probably end up playing after the first quarter for the Bears, but he's not going to do anything just because the rest of the team isn't there. The Vikings are all over the place. They're probably going to go down with COVID by the 3rd week because no one gets vaccinated there. And the Lions are just an ultimate mess. It's crazy that as soon as Rodgers starts to go away from Green Bay, the Lions are like, oh, let's fire every single person and start over. The Lions are obviously going to be the worst team in the division. I'm honestly just rooting for them to lose because I want to see good football, close games that they lose because then they get a good draft pick and, we'll get someone new. Jared Goff is not the answer. He's never been the answer. He will never be the answer. So, maybe 3 wins in a good season. We'll see.
I think it's possible to get more than 3. You never know. And the Vikings, the Bears, there's still a lot of questions in that division. But Tim, we've harped on it a lot on this show throughout the summer about Aaron Rodgers and the question being, how will the Packers adjust this season after everything that happened with Aaron Rodgers? There were some players on his side like Devontae Adams. There were some, especially ownership, who really weren't. So do you think that's going to hurt their performance? And who do you think's coming out of the North?
Well, obviously, first off, to answer who do I think coming out north is, that's the Green Bay Packers. And by the way, Zoe, I know you want to see the Lions lose, but I really want to see the Bears go 0-17 because the New York Giants have their draft pick next year. So I'm really rooting for the Bears to have a terrible season. However, I will say this, overall, this Aaron Rodgers situation is completely, and I mean completely confusing. And when you go through the situation, could this be Rodgers' last hurrah in Green Bay? if he can go out a champion, ultimately speaking, that would be awesome. But let's be honest, like how Zoe said, the way Green Bay works and the lack of treatment, Randall Cobb's not winning you a Super Bowl. The realism is they're probably out in the NFC Championship again. And the other thing, too, Green Bay's been consistent. This roster hasn't had much change overall. Granted, the difference in terms of draft picks, not much big free agency signings throughout big past years and so on to really get a big playmaker. Not saying this team needs one, but defensively, since they've lost guys like Clay Matthews, this team's needed a big boost and hasn't necessarily gotten that. And the fact of the matter is this, I don't see that again from Green Bay this year. Sure, they drafted well, in my opinion. Yeah, they're going to win games, but there's other teams right now in the NFL, for example, the Arizona Cardinals, which don't want to jump ships, but that are, for example, making big moves to get better as a football team. And I think there's a lot other teams now that can compete with Green Bay for a chance to go to a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game.
Yeah, it's very balanced in the NFC this year. Of course, there's the Bucs and there's the Packers, but there's a lot of other solid teams up on the rise. Let's go to Frank's here. Your picks in the NFC North.
I think it's simple enough to go with the Packers. The only team, in my opinion, that has a shot to even compete with them is if Justin Fields started Week 1. And that's just, in my opinion, I thought Chicago would be the only team that could possibly compete with them. Like I said, if Fields were to start Week 1. But with the Red Rocket himself starting Week 1, I don't see that being the case. I believe that the Packers, they got stronger with the draft. And as long as Aaron Rodgers stays the leader that he is, we know that he's wanted out of Green Bay for some time now. As long as he stays that leader that we know he is, then I think Green Bay could make another run at the NFC title.
All right. Well, Andrew Bellows, you in agreement with us? The Packers are winning the North?
Yeah, I am. But I would like to point out, I think it's actually going to be a pretty close race between them and the Vikings, because I think the Vikings actually have gotten quite a bit better. Their main problem was defense last year, and they went out and added Dalvin Tomlinson. They added Patrick Peterson, who are two impact players on defense. So I think they're actually going to be quite good as well. But I do think the Packers will take the division.
Well, let's shift gears to maybe an even easier division to predict, the NFC South. Of course, you've got the defending champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, despite all of Zoe's doubts, are still a really good team, and so is Tom Brady. And they played well against Dallas. Dallas gave them a fight, but I don't see anybody really contending with the Buccaneers. What I will say is this: I still think the Panthers and Falcons are bad. I don't think the New Orleans Saints are going to be as awful as some people think. I think Jameis Winston has made some adjustments, whether it was from his LASIK surgery or whatever. He's a better quarterback than he used to be. And I think there's an opportunity for him to succeed there in New Orleans. What's going to throw them off a little bit is not actually playing at the Superdome, because of the hurricane, they're not going to be home for these first few weeks, which is disappointing for the community there. And of course, they just had to go through this with Katrina a decade and a half ago. But I think the Saints are going to be a playoff caliber team, but nobody's stopping the Bucs in the division. Let's start with Andrew here. You're picking the NFC South.
Yeah, it has to be the Bucs. The Bucs are just too strong. They have so many offensive weapons. Their offensive line is amazing, very solid. Tom Brady can obviously do it at any point in the game. You saw there's a viral picture of him just staring, like 1:24 left in the game. Like, he knows he's got it in the bag. So I think the defense actually, I'm going to disagree with the point earlier. I think the Bucs defense is actually very good. They have a really solid defense. They have Devin White, a middle linebacker, Antoine Winfield as a second-year safety, who played phenomenal last year, especially in the playoff run. They have Vita Vea and a really, I think, collectively great unit on defense. So I think they're the best team in the league, and they're going to win this division.
Tim, over to you on that NFC South.
Yeah, I think the Saints defense, again, in terms of regular season standing, is a pretty solid defense that can compete. But when it's all said and done, no one can compete with Tom Brady. And ultimately, the fact of the matter is this: the Bucs, yeah, you brought back 22 starters from last year in that Super Bowl game. You're going to be left with 21 after this week. But when it's all said and done, this team has the talent, this team has the skill and the capability of repeating as Super Bowl champions. The question is, are you not complacent, and are you able to get, to continue to keep the momentum that they've put together? Week 1's great. You played a really, let's be honest, weak defense in Dallas. I'm eager to see what Tom Brady and this offense can do against stronger defensive teams. And ultimately, if I'm being honest, seeing week 2 and week 3, if Brady continues to produce the numbers that he did in week 1, I'm full set for the record on an idea that Tom Brady could have a potential record-breaking season alongside maybe Patrick Mahomes. Again, additional game. You have to remember, quarterbacks may pass for 500, 600 more yards. Thus, we could see a record broken this year. But I'm fully set. Brady is on fire and could potentially pass for a career high in yards this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the weapons to do it. I think more weapons than maybe he's ever had in New England all that time, and we saw what he was able to do. Joshua Franks, NFC South, your predictions.
I think it's going to actually be closer than a lot of people expect. I've fully gone to the Saints bandwagon in terms of, I think the Saints could be possibly a very good team this year. They had their guy at quarterback to be the heir apparent to Drew Brees, and so far I don't see any reason for them to have any questions. I know there's concerns on how he will play, but I feel like it's going to be a very close division run between the Saints and the Buccaneers, and it's going to be interesting to see if Winston can actually knock off his former team.
Yeah, Jameis Winston definitely is going to be playing with a fire this season in New Orleans. Zoe, your pick for the NFC South.
First of all, just Jameis Winston is the question. Like, he's the thing that's keeping the Saints from being a really good team. He's the blockade. If they can get through him and he can somehow dissolve, I think they'll be better. But for me, I have to go with the Bucs. And this pains me, but to be honest, the Bucs didn't play amazing versus the Cowboys, at least in the beginning. Brady looked nervous, then he settled in, and obviously it's Tom Brady. Won't overlook him again, but you got to go Bucs here. I don't know if they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but compared to the rest of the division, no one else is going to hold up.
Now, maybe the most interesting division is the NFC West. There are 4 teams with the caliber to win that division. I think all 4 have the potential. Now, I have some faith in the San Francisco 49ers, regardless of if it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. The Seahawks, I still have my questions about Russell Wilson aging and that lineup beyond the receivers that he has. The Rams, sorry, Zoe, but I have questions about Matthew Stafford. And the Cardinals seem to always fall apart at the end of the season, no matter how well they played at the beginning of the year. And it seemed like they just got older, bringing in AJ Green and JJ Watt. Larry Fitzgerald now doesn't even have the motivation to play anymore. So I don't really know what the deal is there, but I like the 49ers. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play well. I think it's interesting how Shanahan has left the door open to potentially using Trey Lance in specific packages for week 1. I think Trey Lance is not ready to be a starter just yet, but he has the potential to be an impact player in whatever way he does. Shanahan's always been a crafty coach, and if the 49ers can stay healthy, I think it's going to be a close fight. I absolutely think multiple teams from the NFC West will make the playoffs, but I think the 49ers take the division. Let's start here with Joshua Franks, your pick in the NFC West.
In my opinion, and I don't know if it's a little bit the Houston Texans rubbing off on me or what, but I think over there in Arizona, I think Cliff Kingsbury, he's kind of on the hot seat. They have weapons galore over there. You have Kyler Murray, which in my opinion is a star within himself. As long as you can get him protection and allow him to make the plays that we know he can make. We saw him make them at Oklahoma with a heavy set roster. You're seeing pretty much Cliff Kingsbury being told, hey, you have what you need. Now it's time for you to win. I think with that pressure and that team being as good as it is now, bringing in leaders both on offense and defense, guys that can still perform, I think Arizona is going to be the team to try to take that division.
Andrew Bellows, over to you on the NFC West.
I think the Rams are going to take this division. I'm very confident in their defense. I think Aaron Donald is the best player in the league. Jalen Ramsey is the best corner in the league. They have some good depth out there, and Darius Williams. And they did lose John Johnson and Troy Hill as well. But I still think that overall their unit is very solid. Offensively, I think Sean McVay can get it done with pretty much anyone at quarterback, considering Jared Goff was there for years and they made the Super Bowl with him. They still have some good weapons. They have Cooper Kupp there. Their offensive line is good. So I really think the Rams are solid. I would say the Seahawks are really solid as well. They have a great offense. But I'm not too confident in the Seahawks defense. Their corners are not great. They don't have a lot of depth out there. So I think the Rams are going to win this division.
Interesting. So we've gotten three people, three different picks. Zoe, over to you.
I gotta go with the Seahawks here.
All right.
So you make it 4. For me, I just think if you look at the division, part of me wants to see the Rams succeed because, Matt Stafford, I want him to do well wherever he is. But then again, the Lions get the Rams pick. So if the Rams do bad, the Lions get a better pick. So it depends. I'm all over the place. In terms of who the Rams have, I think they're really scary. And I certainly do think this is one of the scariest divisions. It's going to be really close because you can't count anyone out in this division. For me, the bottom 2 teams battling are the 49ers and the Cardinals. I think the Seahawks and the Rams are going to be the best. And I think the Seahawks will win the division, but I think the Rams will take the wild card.
All right. Well, Tim, you're the tiebreaker here. 4 people, 4 different picks. Who you got winning the NFC West?
Well, first I'll start like this. The San Francisco 49ers for me are always an if because of the fact, can we trust that this team is going to be healthy? Sure, they're fine right now, but we'll see how the season moves forward if this team even is what it was 2 years ago. Because again, you could keep the same roster. You could switch a little bit. Doesn't mean you're still going to be as good. So we'll see what happens with the 49ers. However, at this point, every year we've looked at Seattle. Granted, their defense was terrible last year. How do I put it like this? Haven't we grown to a point now to understand you can never underestimate the Seattle Seahawks? Every year, doesn't mean they'll win the division, but they'll find a way to make the playoffs some way, somehow under Pete Carroll. Thus, I would not underrate the Seattle Seahawks at all in this division race. When you look at the Rams, here's the true question. Is Matthew Stafford actually as good as his stats provide? That's the true question in LA. Not the defense, not anything around it. Well, maybe you could question the targets a little bit that he does have to throw to if they can stay healthy and consistent. Sure, Cooper Kupp's been great, but you don't really have that big playmaker in an instant, in my opinion. You had a running back, he got hurt, and now you're fishing through trades and free agency. I don't know if Sony Michel is going to get them through that hump either, so I'm a little bit eager to see what happens on that offensive end for LA. But and I typically don't agree with Josh on anything, I have to agree the Arizona Cardinals are going to win the NFC West. I mean, fellas, it's the fact of progression. We're seeing this year in, year out. Since Cliff Kingsbury has become the coach of the Arizona Cardinals, this team every single year has gotten better. Last year, this was the worst team passing-wise defensively, 32nd in the league. They have a lot to prove this year defensively. And if they can solve that problem, to mesh with a Kyler Murray offense that now has arguably the best wide receiver outside of maybe Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams in the game of DeAndre Hopkins, this team is going to be a threat. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This offense all around has a mix to run, pass, do anything at once. As long as the defense can step up in big moments and provide some stops, they don't even have to be a top 10 defense in the league. All you have to be is mid-tier, top 20 at best. This team will dominate and win games, that simple. Thus, I truthfully think when you look at the rosters, a lot of less ifs throughout the Arizona Cardinals. But I will say this. Overall, there's going to be at least 2 teams outside of the Cardinals, obviously, that win the West that also advance into a wild card spot.
The West is the strongest division by far, and there's no doubt about it. And I think it's very possible that 2 or even 3 teams in that division make the playoffs. But let's shift gears to the AFC, to what I think is the most unpredictable division this season, the AFC East, because the Bills, we know they're going to be great, and they're my pick to win the division. But it's really beyond that there's a lot of questions. There are Dolphins fans who, of course, have doubts in Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. The Dolphins themselves were interested in potentially Deshaun Watson. So there are people out there who think he might not be the fit there in Miami. Of course, the Patriots, we already talked about it a lot last week on this show. Cam Newton gone, Mac Jones, the starting quarterback, placed into a tough situation. And Zach Wilson, I know there's all the hype surrounding him and he looked good in the preseason, but the last time the Jets had a young rookie quarterback, they ruined Sam Darnold. So a lot of questions there. I say the Bills take the division easily. I think the Patriots have a chance to potentially sneak into a wild card spot. Let's start this one with Zoe here on the AFC East.
I agree with you on the Bills 100%. I don't agree with you as much on the Patriots taking a wild card, just because there are some other teams in the AFC who are scary, who I think would sneak in over the Patriots. I don't think the Patriots have the depth anymore to really do that, just in terms of defense and everything going on there. Plus, in order to rely on Mac Jones, as good as he might be and will perform this season, it's hard to rely on him to get you into the playoffs, even with Bill Belichick and everything you have going there. I think the rest of the division, to be honest, is kind of a mess. I don't know what's happening there. It's kind of going to be the same thing as some other divisions where it's like, who's battling for third? Like it's not, you watch it if nothing else is on, but Bills take it 100%.
Andrew Bellows, how about you? Get in agreement on the Buffalo Bills?
I'm going to disagree. I think that the Patriots are going to take this division. I think the Patriots are a really strong team. I think Bill Belichick is a great coach, and he's had money to spend. He's all of the money that he's spent will make this team a lot better. And I really do think that they've upgraded in key positions. They're getting Dante Hightower back. Matt Judon's coming in on the defense. They're getting two good tight ends in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. And their offensive line, as always, it's the Patriots. So it's very good. And they don't have a hard schedule. So I really think that Belichick can game plan around the Bills. He can game plan around the Dolphins. And he can win some of these tough games, kind of grind them out. And I also don't think the Bills are going to perform as well as they did last year. I think they were kind of hitting a hot streak, and I'm not sure if they'll reach quite that level this year. So I'm going to go with the Patriots.
So you think Mac Jones is going to have a really good year?
Yes, I'm a big, because he doesn't have to do much in that offense. It's centered around drags and slants, and he doesn't have to throw down the field. He doesn't have to do anything special. He just has to be serviceable. He just has to be, good. And I think he can do that for them.
Is he this year's rookie of the year then, in your opinion?
No, I'm going to say it's Najee Harris, actually, because I think Najee Harris is in a good system in Pittsburgh where Mike Tomlin has a history of having a workforce running back. You have Le'Veon Bell for years there, getting passes, getting a lot of carries. And I think they're going to try and replicate that with Najee. Najee's going to have a great year, in my opinion. So, yeah.
All right, well, let's shift gears to Joshua Franks now. You're picking the AFC East after this surprise from Andrew.
Well, Lordy, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. I don't think it's much of a surprise. A lot of question marks with the Dolphins, in my opinion, especially around that offense. The Jets are just the Giants' little brother. In the Bills, I think they fall apart more closer towards the end of the season. Josh Allen's going to be in the MVP conversation no matter what. But even though I considered Mac Jones to be a bust coming into the draft, I said he shouldn't have been drafted till the second or third round at most, in my opinion, comparatively to other people. I think anybody that knows Bill Belichick will find a way to make a player successful. I think last year with Brady going after the Super Bowl, I think it set a fire more under Bill Belichick to say, okay, well, now I have to prove myself. And I think this is going to be a good year for the Patriots. They have a lot of weapons on that team. It looks very similar to an Alabama-style offense, and it's allowing Mac Jones to feel comfortable. And I feel like the Patriots are going to be the ones to, as you said, shockingly win that division.
All right, so we got 2 picks for the Bills, 2 picks for the Patriots. Tim, who are you going with?
I'm going to go with the Bills to break the tie. Listen, I think the Patriots are going to be a lot better than last season, but I truthfully still don't have as much faith in Mac Jones. I understand he looked pretty solid in the preseason, and that's great. But, for example, so did Daniel Jones, and we saw what he turned out to be right now for the New York Giants. So we'll see overall what that turns out to be. And the other thing, too, is I truthfully cannot rely on guys like Hunter Henry, who has historically been hurt his entire career. And Nelson Aguilar of recent, might I add, not a number one receiver anywhere he's really went. He wasn't really the number one in Philadelphia. And he also, too, has gone through injury woes up and down. So the question is for New England, can your players stay healthy offensively? And is Mac Jones really that dang good? So when you have those question marks, to me, it's just really hard to say, wow, this team's going to win the division. I understand Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time. And I understand he doesn't have Tom Brady anymore. But again, there's a transition in football for a reason. You're not always the best forever. That's the realism. I'm not saying Bill Belichick can't turn his team around, but to say, oh, he had all this money in one season and now the Patriots are going to be a winner, it's not that simple with the guys they have. They're going to need a little bit more time, in my opinion. The Bills have what they have. However, I forgot who said it, but I agree as well. They're not going to be as good as last year. That, was a good run. They had a little bit of a weaker schedule. The Bills are going to be a playoff team, but I don't really still see them being a Super Bowl caliber type of team this year. They need a lot of work as well.
Yeah, I do think the Bills are going to take a step back a little bit. And speaking of taking a step back, the Baltimore Ravens, maybe not their fault, but their entire backfield is in the hospital right now. And I mean, they are a mess at this point. And Lamar Jackson, I feel like slowly but surely defenses are starting to figure him out. And whenever he's in the playoffs, things just fall apart for Baltimore. So in the North, I personally don't think it's going to be that close. Everybody's been hyping up this division. I think the Cleveland Browns, I think this is a big year for the Browns. They have the least questions of all these teams. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have a good year. I think the Steelers make the playoffs. And I agree with Andrew that Najee Harris was a great draft pick for them. Really resembles both Le'Veon Bell and James Conner, who both were under the radar in drafts, but in a Mike Tomlin system, succeeded as running backs. The Bengals, Joe Burrow is still going to get mangled repeatedly. Jamar Chase now says he can't catch NFL football, so I don't know what's going on there. They're still the weakest link of that division, and Baltimore just is too banged up to really contend. So I've got the Browns taking the AFC North. I'll start with Joshua Franks here with the North.
Well, you said it yourself. The Ravens, I mean, their whole running back core outside of Lamar Jackson and Le'Veon Bell is completely destroyed. And yes, I did call Lamar Jackson a running back. Don't hate on me for it. But the AFC as a whole, I feel like the number one team in the AFC is in this division. I think it's the Cleveland Browns. I think the Browns were better than the Chiefs last year, and I think that targeting call last year is really going to set a fire under them to say, hey, we got this taken away from us. Now we're coming back even more focused and prepared to try to run this not only division, but run this conference. And I think the Browns just run through this division. They're looking for another playoff run and possibly a Super Bowl.
All right, let's go to Tim Moore here on the AFC North.
I'm also going to have to agree. I think the Cleveland Browns are a really, really strong team at the threat. And here's the other thing, too. We looked at this team last year. They made the playoffs. We knew eventually with Pittsburgh falling apart, they were going to knock off the Steelers and find some momentum. But we have to remember this. Last year, they were missing their number one target from a torn ACL, and that was Odell Beckham Jr. And by God, Odell, let's be honest. Since he's been in Cleveland, he's been mediocre and he hasn't played to the potential that he did in New York when he was the number one target. But when Odell has these questions and people talking about, oh, is he that? Is he this? That's when he really does step up and shine. I think Odell has a really big year this year receiving for Cleveland. And I think overall the Browns, again, they dominate the AFC North. But, and I'm sure we'll talk about wild cards more further, I do believe just like how last year we saw 3 teams winning 10-plus games, I think that story returns again in the AFC North.
Yeah, the AFC North, I do think is the strongest overall of the 4 divisions in the AFC, but I still think there's a lot of questions with teams beyond the Cleveland Browns. Zoe, how about you in the North?
First of all, Tim, you act like Odell was good when he was in New York. That was, all right. He's gonna have to play better than he ever did in New York. No, he had one catch. Thank you. Everything else that he couldn't catch a ball with 2 hands, dropped everything that came to him, made 1 or 2 nice catches ever. Wow. Congrats, Odell. You're the best receiver of all time. Oh, you made it on Madden too. Wow. Fantastic. But in terms of this division,
not how many receivers made an all-pro game outside, or say the Pro Bowl outside of Calvin Johnson since his retirement?
What'd you say? I didn't even hear. I just heard Calvin.
Receivers on the Lions have made a Pro Bowl since Calvin Johnson's retirement.
Okay, first of all, Kenny Golladay. Second of all, have I been?
Jones,
I know you have Kenny. I know. No, I know you have Kenny Golladay now, but I'm saying that Odell was never good. Why doesn't Kenny matter?
1,300 yards receiving.
Because he was the only person ever that he thrown to. How many drop balls did he have that year?
Fair. But I also look at it like this. Yeah, at the end of the day, he was number one target. He got money.
Okay, money doesn't equal a good receiver. What? I'm in the room with 4 Giants fans. This is going to go really well for me.
Well, this is I'm very critical of the Giants. The one thing I'm going to say, if you're the only target, and anybody that knows football, if you're the only reliable target on the team, you're going to have drops as far as when defenses are double covering you, triple covering you.
I mean, ask Larry Fitzgerald. He never had that many drops.
Yeah, but Larry Fitzgerald was never really a number one target. He was a slot receiver on a team.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean he wasn't good, but he was a slot receiver. He was never covered ultimately every single down by number one corners.
But a lot of wide receivers that have those drops are drops that are hard catches they didn't make. Odell's drops came to balls that were right here that he either tried to catch with one hand because he's not good with two, or tried to catch with his body because as a receiver, he still doesn't use his damn hands unless it's a one-hand catch over his back.
Now, in terms of playoffs, Zoe, I agree with that. I mean, the playoffs, the whole boat incident decided the Giants' future and fate. And I'll tell you what, Ben McAdoo was still a terrible coach no matter what happened. But at the end of the day, Odell, the money he got and then got traded away and so on, I still think it's pretty much deserving. I think he has potential to still be a top 10 receiver in the league, whether anyone likes it or not. And again, I mean, give the man at least a little bit of respect. You couldn't give Tom Brady respect last year.
Okay, well, I realized that I was wrong about the Tom Brady thing, but Odell's not Tom Brady.
Tim, you can't equate Tom Brady and
yeah, what?
You know what?
Zoe, I'm disappointed that you said 4 Giants fans. You're equating me with the Giants fans?
Oh, I forgot. No, sorry, Eagles. As if that's any better. Eagles, sorry.
But anyway, let's get back on track here. Zoe, your pick for the AFC North.
The AFC North, I think you have to go Browns. I agree with all of you there. Even with Odell and everything going on, they did it without him, and they still managed to be good. Jarvis Landry's going to step up big time. Nick Chubb's scary behind Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt, always terrifying on the goal line. I think the Browns take it.
And lastly, Andrew in the North.
First of all, I can't believe you just said Odell isn't good. That is crazy to me. He is one of the best route runners in the league when he's healthy still. But answering your question, I think the Browns are going to win this division as well. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's going to be a 3-way race with the Steelers, Ravens, and the Browns. But I just think the Browns are too good, basically. They're very, run heavy against 2 teams that in the division, Ravens and Steelers, that both have great run defense. So I'm very interested to see that matchup. But I do think, Chubb and Hunt will basically run over these teams that don't have run defense, and I think they're gonna win this division.
All right, let's shift gears to the AFC South. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, Carson Wentz has already managed to get hurt before week 1, so there's talent on that team. They have some nice young running backs, but there's just tons of injuries, like there always is with the Indianapolis Colts. I don't see them as much more than a 500 team. Jacksonville Jaguars, I think, have the chance to be an absolute dumpster fire this season. They lose Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence has not looked great during the preseason. Not putting too many doubts on him already. I mean, we haven't seen him in regular season action yet. My concern is with Urban Meyer as a coach, because Tim and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's historically happened that when college coaches translate to the NFL, things don't go well to start with. We've seen it with Cliff Kingsbury. We've seen it with Steve Spurrier. We've seen it with Nick Saban. The only one to really defy that was Pete Carroll, who also had some NFL experience before he went to USC and established himself there. So I think the Jaguars have too many questions, and the Houston Texans have Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback. Every year, Tyrod Taylor's with a new team, and he's their starting quarterback for the first 2 weeks. That's just how it goes in the NFL. But Texans are going to be really bad. So I think the Tennessee Titans adding Julio Jones, having Tannehill being able to work with both Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, plus having a running back in Derrick Henry, just neutralizes the fact that they did lose Jonnu Smith, which is a significant loss for that offense. Titans defense looked really good in the postseason as well. So I think Tennessee wins the South rather easily. Let's start with Tim here.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. I think the Tennessee Titans overall are put well together. Don't get me wrong, the Colts are really good, but they face a lot of injury woes, and there's a lot of questions. Quentin Nelson, one of their best guards, offensively, the big guy that you could trust to protect and pay a lot of money for, he's hurt early on. Sure, I'm confident Jonathan Taylor may be great, but at the end of the day, you don't even know who's going to play quarterback for the Colts. And when Carson Wentz is healthy, what exactly is he going to be? So I think about this for Indianapolis. I might as well add to no T.Y. Hilton. That's also out for a bit. So for me, for Indianapolis, they're going to have a lot to prove. But I mean, again, Tennessee, I think this year Julio Jones is going to have, another very solid statistic season. But I really think, like Mike Evans, for example, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he's going to play that type of role where he's going to face a role where, how do I put it? He's going to have statistically, a solid season, but his role is going to be getting double covered to get other main guys on that receiving core open. Thus, I expect 2 and 3 receivers on the Tennessee Titans to ultimately have bigger, better seasons. I think Ryan Tannehill, who might I add, not just in fantasy terms, but overall in the NFL, was a top 5 passer last year. So with that being said, I think this passing offense has a lot to prove for Tennessee, and overall is bolstered. Obviously, Derrick Henry too is getting a little bit less stress on his back this year, which could be a good thing because you could see him healthy moving forward. And that defense is still pretty consistent. Yeah, they lost a couple of guys, but I mean, Tennessee's always been a pretty solid defense. So overall, a team that I don't want to say they're going to win a Super Bowl, but definitely an interesting team come the playoffs on if they can compete, if they cannot compete.
Yeah, I think Tennessee Titans surely could be contenders in the AFC for sure. Zoe, over to you for the AFC South.
I agree as well. I haven't gotten, other than the Odell thing, I haven't gotten to make many opposite picks than you guys, but I have to go Titans as well. I think it does hurt them losing Corey Davis and Johnny Smith. It's going to be an adjustment with that. AJ Brown's going to have to adjust from, not being that number one guy because Julio comes in, but I think it's going to work out really well. If anything, I think we're going to see AJ Brown's production increase because there'll be less double teaming on him because you still have a guy like Julio. And yell at me again, but I don't think Julio is the best receiver. I don't think he's up there anymore. I think he's old and washed up, but he's still going to draw those double teams. He's still going to draw coverage from there. Defense, as you said, has been really good, Tim. And Derrick Henry, who could count out Derrick Henry, the Heisman winner. So absolutely got to go Titans.
Derrick Henry is just crazy when he does the stiff arms last year when he sent Josh Norman flying in that game against the Bills was hilarious. Andrew Bellows, your picks for the AFC South.
Yeah, I gotta go with the Titans. I think they're too strong. Added Julio Jones to already very good offense. So I think the Titans are really strong. I don't see the Jags or Texans putting up any bit of a fight in this division. I think both of them are bad. Both of them are going through transition periods. The Texans especially, like no one knows what's going on there. And the Colts are just the Colts. Like they're a really solid team. Very good defense. But at the end of the day, I think the Titans are just too strong and they'll win this division.
Yeah, the Texans are in just a miserable spot. So you've got Deshaun Watson requesting a trade. Also, they can't really put him on the field with all the lawsuits going on. So nobody's going to want him. Plus, and so they're basically paying him to not play right now. And they have Tyrod Taylor as their starting quarterback. I think that's the worst team in the NFL this season. It's crazy to think only 18 months ago, they were leading the Kansas City Chiefs by 18 points in a playoff game. So it's been quite the negative turnaround for the Texans, who had been a pretty consistent team these past few years. Joshua Franks, lastly, over to you in the AFC South.
Last thing I want to talk about is the Texans. But the Colts, I will say, they're in a quarterback's dream scenario right now. They just can't find a quarterback that'll stay healthy behind that offensive line. And the one thing about Tennessee, and I think Zoe hit it right on the head, when you have two receivers that require to be double covered to even get a hint of coverage on them every play, then you're there for success. This is not just going to be a run heavy offense like we've seen over the past few years. Even though you do have a Mack truck in the backfield called Derrick Henry, this provides them options now, in which I believe that AJ Brown is going to be more successful. He has more of a mentor there as well. And also another guy that requires, safety help over the top or even underneath whenever it comes to running routes. Two physical guys on the same team, both on the field at the same time. If I'm that offensive coordinator, I'm so excited for what I could do this season.
Now let's move on to the last division, which I think might be the easiest. The AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs, turning their roster, have made the Super Bowl back-to-back years, looked really bad in the Super Bowl, but let's not forget they were without their offensive line and that's kind of the reason that all happened. I still don't think any of these teams are going to compete with them, but I think the Chargers have potential. I know every year it seems like everybody's hyping up the Chargers that they're going to win 10, 11 games, and then they stink. So, but Justin Herbert proved himself last year. Justin Herbert outplayed, I'd argue, both Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa when they were healthy. Herbert really surprised everyone. He was kind of unknown entering the draft, aside from a really good performance in the Rose Bowl for Oregon. And I think they've found their guy. The Raiders have the chance to be decent. And Derek Carr, I still think, is a criminally underrated quarterback, but just everything with John Gruden, with Mike Mayock, and there's just a lot of drama in that franchise. And then there's supposedly some other rumors where there's some tax issues with the franchise. So I don't know what's going on there. And then the Denver Broncos, I think, could be a mediocre team this year. Teddy Bridgewater now with another new team. They're not going to be terrible because they have some weapons. Of course, Jerry Jeudy leading the way out there in the Mile High City, but I think the Chiefs win the division pretty easily. Zoe, we'll start with you here for the West.
Also got to go Chiefs there. I mean, it's not even going to be close. It never is. It's the Chiefs. They are a team that every year they look to the Super Bowl. A lot of teams are just like, oh, are we going to make the playoffs? The Chiefs are eyes set in the Super Bowl. It was like the Bucs last year. They were like Super Bowl or bust. Chiefs are Super Bowl or bust every year. It's just the way Patrick Mahomes works. 500 yards a game, multiple touchdowns, and Super Bowl or bust. Those are the Chiefs' three things. So, if their coaching staff can stay normal and everything, I think they're going to be totally fine.
Andrew Bellows, how about you on the West?
It's got to be the Chiefs. They're just very good, high-powered offense, and their defense doesn't have to be good like always. It doesn't have to be amazing. It just has to be middle of the road because their offense is just that good. Travis Kelce is probably the most reliable tight end in the league. Tyreek Hill is going to always do his thing. As far as the rest of the teams go, I think two of them, like the Broncos and the Raiders, are like kind of in the same spot. They're both like have pretty low ceilings and they have pretty like high floors. So they're probably both going to be like around average. But the Chargers are a very interesting team this year. I think Herbert, especially in his second year, can make a jump, which is weird to say because he was amazing last year, but he could even make a larger jump, especially with Keenan Allen, and you've got a really good defense there as well. You're getting Derwin James back, and Derwin James is one of my favorite players in the league. He's just very all-around great safety. So I think this is like the Chiefs will win this division, but I do think Chargers can be very good as well.
I think it's possible that the Chargers steal a regular season game from the Chiefs. It seems like every year there's always a game where the Chiefs play really bad, and it's usually against the divisional opponent. I think the Chargers are a team that could challenge them, possibly in a high-scoring game if Justin Herbert can get that offense working. Joshua Franks, over to you on the West.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say a few things. Raiders, please save Derek Carr. Just trade him something. Just get him out of there. He deserves so much better. The Broncos, they're one piece of that team away from being a really good team, and it's just offensive consistency. Who's your leader? Who's your top guy? That's all the Broncos are missing, in my opinion, from being a top team. The Chiefs, they're a powerhouse. Every year people are saying that, they can be the top team in the AFC. I don't think they're the top team in the AFC this year. And they've kind of slacked on gaining progression. They made it to the Super Bowl, but I don't see them building as much as they were whenever they were that powerhouse. They've kind of flatlined, just sitting comfortably where they're at. And one thing that coaches always say is when you're comfortable with where you're at, you're going to find a way to lose success. And that's why I think the Chargers are going to shock everyone. They're going to be the ones to win the AFC West, especially if they stay healthy. I really like what I saw with Herbert last year. You have Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, all those guys on that offense. And then Derwin James coming back. I believe he's a better safety, and he comparatively, he plays similar to Isaiah Simmons, mostly like a guy that you can bring down into the box. He can also play well in coverage. He can basically be your defense and can shut down a whole side of the field. So I really like the Chargers and what I'm looking at with them, and I think they're going to shock the world and take the AFC West.
All right, well, that's a bold prediction there from Joshua Franks. Tim, last division pick on this show, and then we'll get to the Super Bowl predictions. Who you got in the AFC West?
Well, last year I had high expectations on the Raiders to overall win the division, or excuse me, not win the division, rather make it through a wild card. And this year, I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Knock on wood if you're with me. However, all jokes aside, um, Franks brings up a very strong point about this Chargers team. I think they're going to be very surprising this year. I just don't know. Apologize. I just don't know if they're going to win the AFC West. I truthfully think, again, I mentioned earlier, I thought, just for example, in the NFC West, how we saw two wildcard teams. I see two wildcard teams coming from the AFC North this year, and the Chargers being that wildcard team in the AFC West. I think the Chiefs are going to win this. Listen, Randy Reid came back. The last time Randy Reid was in Kansas City, the Chiefs won a Super Bowl. So for me, there's no reason why this team should not be successful again this year. Randy Reid is the heart and soul of this team. Patrick Mahomes is, let's be honest, the best quarterback in the league. And this offense is still one of the scariest offenses you will see. The Chiefs are slowly becoming a dynasty. That's the fact of the matter. This is the biggest threat, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL every single year. And until this team has some sort of downfall in terms of production, is the day I will say the Kansas City Chiefs are no longer a dynasty. But until that day happens, which will probably be 10 years from now, or whenever they can't afford to re-sign an entire team, because that day will also ultimately come, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to probably go to the Super Bowl this year. They're going to dominate the West, and maybe we'll see a Bucs Chiefs repeat in the Super Bowl this year.
All right. Well, that's where we get to now. The final portion of the show. Of course, we have to make our Super Bowl predictions for this season. And I'm going to start things off here with Andrew Bellows to give his pick.
So when I was thinking about this, I thought of a lot of things. I did think of a Chiefs Bucks rematch, but I just don't think it could happen. But I don't think it's realistic, especially because, well, no, it is realistic, but I don't think it's going to happen because it's just so hard for teams to repeat winning conference championships. So I'm actually going to go with the Packers in the NFC. I think it's Aaron Rodgers' last dance. It's Devontae Adams' last year of his contract, so probably his last dance as well. And I just think they're a really strong team overall. I think they're going to win this conference. And on the other side, I'm going to have the Browns. I think the Browns are an amazing team this year. I think they have the ability to stop Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I do like the Titans as well, but the Titans, for me, do have questions on defense. And when you're getting to that point in the playoffs, it's very important to have a good defense. So I'm going to say Browns and Packers. And I think I'm going to have the Packers winning it. I'm going to have Aaron Rodgers getting his second ring.
Interesting. All right, I'll go now because Andrew actually stole my AFC pick. I think the Cleveland Browns are going to do it. I think they're going to the Super Bowl. I think they're going to have, let's not forget, I know Mahomes got hurt in the second half of that game, but the Cleveland Browns were playing Kansas City very tough in that postseason matchup. They obliterated the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know the Steelers were an absolute free fall for the last 4 or 5 weeks of last season, but I really like this team. I think there's a lot of potential across the roster for the Cleveland Browns, and they have one of the best defenses. Like Andrew said, defense matters. In the NFC, I think the Packers are going to put up a fight, but don't call this the last dance. Don't start comparing Aaron Rodgers to Michael Jordan. They're not I don't think they're getting past the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think there's going to be some challengers in the West in the playoffs. I think San Francisco has the potential. Seattle with the experience of Russell Wilson as well. Whoever wins the NFC East is going to lose in the first round. That's just how it works every year. But I think the Buccaneers go to the Super Bowl as Tom Brady seeks his 8th against the Browns. And in a tight battle, I say that the Cleveland Browns turn all the misery around and win the Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield beats Tom Brady, and it's going to just leave Brady hungry to come back for another season as he tries to get that 8th championship. I know it's usually only NFC East teams that defeat Tom Brady, but I think that's going to change this season, and I think the Cleveland Browns win the championship, win the Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield has a great year. Nick Chubb wins Super Bowl MVP. I'll even go that far. I think he's going to have a great year with his new contract. Joshua Franks, how about you on your Super Bowl picks?
Well, I think there's a pretty good consensus here that the Browns are hungry. after that missed targeting call last year, they came this close, and I know they want to get it for their fan base. Like I said, I think they're the best team in the AFC. I think the Browns are going to the Super Bowl, and I can't believe the disrespect here. I don't know if I'm too much on the train for this team. I mean, y'all haven't even mentioned it yet. In fact, I think Zoe said they're going to be the bottom of the division. Why is Arizona being put down so much? I think honestly, they're one of the top 3 teams in the NFC. And if the Buccaneers drop enough games, I feel like Arizona could be one of the teams that shock you and go to the Super Bowl. I think it's Browns versus Cardinals in a year in which we could see JJ Watt and AJ Green both retire, especially if they win a ring. And unfortunately, I just don't see it happening there. With the Cardinals, though, I think the Browns are just too hungry. I think it's their time to shine. I see the Browns. And to answer on the Packers, though, I talked about the leader among men with Aaron Rodgers. How can you trust a guy to lead you to a Super Bowl when he and your number one receiver both won't out of that team? That's all I got to say. So I'm going to leave it at that one. But Browns and Cardinals, and I think Browns take it.
So nobody's taken the Chiefs yet to make it to the Super Bowl. Zoe, what's your pick so we can make fun of you in February about it?
I'll change that one for you. I'm going to go with a repeat, to be honest. And the reason, part of me, not going to lie, wanted to pick the Rams to go to the Super Bowl. And first of all, I know I would have been mocked. And second of all, the problem is that I think the Chiefs definitely come out of the AFC. I think, maybe there are some tough games and stuff, but you do the experience, how good they are in the playoffs, despite the last Super Bowl because of their offensive line and just how high powered that offense is. If you look at the other side, you see who's the only team that has the offense to go up against them. And you have to go with the Bucs. No other team has the same high powered offense that could face the Chiefs. So I say the two of them meet up. And this year, I gotta say, I think once you get to the Super Bowl, I think you go Bucs. And I know this is crazy. I know crazy because what I said last year, but I think you go Bucs just because if anyone's going to have a repeat, it's going to be Tom Brady. It's going to be the Bucs. And a lot of them know this is the last year. Last year we thought that, but this is really the last year and it's Super Bowl or bust for them. The Chiefs have plenty of years to come. And I think the Bucs are going to do it one last time and then we'll see them fizzle out.
All right. Well, now we get down to the maestro himself. The man who last year on MLB opening day correctly projected the Yankees beating the Nationals, the right number of runs, the right number of hits, and that Giancarlo Stanton would hit a home run in the first inning. Tim, who you got in the Super Bowl?
I'm going to have to say, just like Zoe, it's a repeat. Kansas City, Tampa Bay. Listen, I'm very bought into the Browns. I think they come one game short and they lose an AFC championship this year. On the NFC side, listen, let's be honest. It's Aaron Rodgers that's always coming one game short. It's always been the GOAT debate. Remember that terrible ad on a Monday Night Football game between Rodgers and Brady? Listen, no disrespect to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the greatest passer, in my opinion, of all time. Statistically speaking, no one will ever have a touchdown interception ratio ever in the history of football ever again like Aaron Rodgers. However, Tom Brady is simply put the greatest of all time. But the greatest of all time will not win the Super Bowl this year. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to be Super Bowl champions. Listen, I've seen this progression up and down. Yes, Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl, and I'm so happy for him 2 years ago. But this team came last year, fallen apart. They were completely destroyed. Did not have a single offensive lineman to protect Patrick Mahomes. And that team was capable of winning a Super Bowl. Let's be honest. So for me, a little bit of motivation this year. Again, you brought Randy Reed back, who was your hero to ultimately bring you to a Super Bowl championship 2 years ago. Of course, if anyone's followed the parody, you understand what I'm saying. But overall, with that being said, I truthfully think Steve Spagnuolo, might I add, want to see him win another Super Bowl, but the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be your Super Bowl champions by, and I'll even go deeper, final score projection 31-26 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
26. We're going to end up getting a square down here. But all right, well, we'll have to hash back to this in February. But that's going to about wrap up today's episode. Hope everybody enjoyed our season preview. Next week, we'll be back to talk about NFL Week 1, baseball pennant chase going on. NASCAR has a playoff elimination race next Saturday night, so we're going to have a lot to talk about on that episode. A thank you to Andrew Bellows and Joshua Franks and Zoe Alter all for joining us today for this little preview of the season. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here on Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend and enjoy week 1 of the NFL season.